something shifted in them recently. Not gradually, the way most changes move through a person in slow, barely perceptible degrees. This one arrived like a cold window suddenly opening in a warm room. Fast, undeniable. The kind of shift that doesn't allow for the comfortable middle ground of partial awareness. They saw something, understood something, a truth about what they did, about what it actually cost you, about the real dimensions of the damage landed in them with a force they were completely unprepared for. And it scared them, not the performative fear of someone calculating consequences, the deeper kind, the kind that arrives when a person looks clearly, possibly for the first time, at the gap between who they believed themselves to be and what their actions actually produced in another person's life. When the story they've been telling themselves, the one where it wasn't that serious, where you'd be fine, where they could explain it away with enough context, simply stops holding together, their story fell apart. And in its place, you, the actual you, the one who went home and felt everything they were too comfortable to consider, the one who held it together in front of them and then sat alone with what they'd done to you in the privacy of your own four walls. They're seeing that person now, and it's doing something to them they didn't anticipate. Before anything else, before we talk about them, before we talk about what's changing, before we explore what any of this means for you going forward, I need to say something directly. You have been through something real, not a misunderstanding, not a rough patch that both sides contributed to equally that can be resolved with mutual accountability and a good conversation. Something was done to you by someone who should have known better, possibly did know better, and chose the path of their own convenience or fear or emotional limitation anyway. And you, with your nature, your capacity for loyalty that borders on the devotional, your instinct to understand rather than condemn, you absorbed it, processed it, tried to make sense of it, gave the benefit of the doubt past the point where the doubt had stopped deserving the benefit. The fact that you survived it with your dignity intact is not a small thing. The fact that you didn't become what they perhaps feared you, would bitter, vindictive, loud in your pain that reflects something about your character that is genuinely extraordinary. But I also want to name this. The grace with which you carried it didn't make it lighter. It made it invisible to them. And invisible pain has a particular loneliness to it. The specific ache of being hurt by someone who doesn't fully register the hurt, who continues their days without apparent consequence while you are quietly rebuilding something they broke. That invisibility is ending. Something happened recently, an event, a conversation, a mutual witness, something observed that made the reality of your experience land for them in a way that their own imagination had failed to produce. They either saw you in a context that reminded them of who you were before everything changed, or someone said something casually without agenda that contained a detail about how you've been, what you've been navigating, the particular shape of the aftermath you've been living in. Or perhaps they simply sat still long enough in a quiet moment for the deflecting to stop working and the truth to arrive uninvited. However, the channel opened, it opened. And what came through was not abstract guilt, not the low grade, manageable discomfort of knowing you probably should have done something differently. What came through was specific, dimensional, the real weight of what it feels like to be on the receiving end of what they did, arriving in them in a form they couldn't immediately organize into something more comfortable. That specificity is what's scaring them. Vague guilt is livable. You can negotiate with vague guilt, reframe it, file it somewhere less prominent in the architecture of your daily self perception. Specific guilt, the kind that comes with a face and a cost, and the knowledge of what you actually took from a person that is not so easily managed. They are not managing it well right now. I want to tell you what's happening inside them, not to generate sympathy on their behalf, because your sympathy is not theirs to claim right now, but because understanding the mechanics of someone's awakening helps you navigate your own response to it with clarity rather than reactivity. There is shame present. Real shame, not the performed variety, the kind that sits behind the sternum and doesn't lift when you change the subject. It arrived when the reality of your experience became undeniable to them, and it has not left. They are moving through their days, carrying it in a way that is new and uncomfortable, and this is important, instructive, that discomfort is the mechanism of actual change, not the announcement of change. The uncomfortable, private, can't look away from it process of reckoning with the distance between who you claim to be and what you actually did. They are also afraid. Afraid of several things simultaneously, and I want to be specific about each. Afraid that it's too late, that the window for repair has closed, that whatever they might do or say now will arrive after you've already completed the internal work of releasing them, that they missed it, that in taking so long to understand what they did, they forfeited the opportunity to do anything about it. Afraid that, you know, not the surface details, but the deeper truth of who they revealed themselves to be when they made the choices they made. That you have already seen them clearly and filed that clarity somewhere permanent. And afraid of themselves, slightly of the version of themselves that was capable of causing this, the part that didn't prioritize your well being when it mattered, the part that chose the easier path at your expense. Meeting that part of yourself with clear eyes is not comfortable for anyone. Now, I want to speak directly to the question that I suspect is sitting at the center of all of this for you, the one you keep approaching and then stepping back from, because it feels almost too important to examine directly. Does it matter? Does their awakening, their discomfort, their fear, does any of it change what happened, or change you, or change what you need going forward? Is this the beginning of something repaired, or just the epilogue of something finished? Is this information that should move you toward them, or simply information? Here's what I keep reading in your energy, and I want to say it carefully because I think precision matters here. The answer is not yet decided. And crucially, it is yours to decide, not theirs. Not the timing of their awakening, not the sincerity of their remorse, not what they want from the interaction that's likely coming. Yours. You are the one who experienced this. You are the one who did the private work of surviving it. You are the only one with full access to what it actually cost you. And therefore, you are the only one with the standing to determine what, if anything, you are willing to do with their recognition now that it's arrived. Do not let their discomfort become your emergency. That is the sentence I most want you to carry out of this reading. Their reckoning is not your responsibility to manage or relieve. The fact that they're scared does not obligate you to comfort them. The fact that they're beginning to understand does not mean you owe them the opportunity to make it right on their terms and timeline. You get to decide what you need. And that might be conversation, it might be distance, it might be something you don't have language for yet that will become clearer as the situation unfolds. But whatever it is, it comes from you. it serves you. It is not shaped by the pressure of their guilt or the urgency of their need to feel better about themselves. Something I want to name about this moment in the larger arc of your story, because there's a perspective available from a slight distance that's harder to see from inside it. This is a pivot, not because of what they're feeling, because of what they're feeling reflects about where you are. People don't begin to grasp the full weight of what they did to someone until that person has moved far enough forward that the contrast becomes visible. When you're still in the same place, still available in the same way, still reflecting their version of the story back to them through your continued proximity, there's no contrast, nothing to see. The fact that they can finally see the damage is evidence that you have moved. Maybe you didn't notice yourself moving. Maybe it happened in the incremental, almost imperceptible way that healing tends to happen: one small decision, one quietly maintained boundary, one morning that was marginally lighter than the one before, accumulated over time into something genuinely different. But you moved. The you that exists right now is not the same you that was in the middle of what they put you through. And that movement, your movement, generated entirely by your own internal work, is what made the damage visible to them at last. They could only see what they did because you stopped absorbing it. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. There's something approaching in terms of contact, a reach out, an encounter, something that creates the conditions for a conversation neither of you has had yet. The energy around this arrival is tense in the specific way of something overdue, the particular atmospheric quality of a sky that's been holding weather for too long. When it comes, they will not arrive with the easy confidence of someone who knows how this lands. Whatever they'd rehearsed, whatever they'd imagined saying, is going to feel insufficient in the actual moment, because the actual moment contains you, real and present, and no longer the person they thought they were dealing with. You've changed in ways they're going to notice immediately, even before either of you has said anything significant. And in that moment, Virgo, in that specific beat of recognition, when they look at you and understand, perhaps for the first time, that you are genuinely okay without them, something interesting is going to happen to them. The fear sharpens, because the version of this they feared most wasn't your anger, it was your peace, your self-possession. Your complete and evident ability to continue existing, and existing well, without the chapter that contained them, that is what will be most confronting to witness. Not your pain they'd prepared for your pain. Your wholeness is the thing they weren't prepared for. Show them your wholeness, not as performance, not as something engineered to produce an effect, simply by being exactly who you've become. Stand in it. Let them look. I want to touch on what the universe is doing in this moment, because I don't think it's coincidental, and I think understanding the larger mechanism matters. There's a principle that operates beneath the visible surface of human dynamics, something that isn't exactly karma in the simplified version of that word, but something adjacent to it, something that might be described more accurately as energetic accounting. The idea that reality over time finds its honest level. That the gaps between what was presented and what was true, between how people behaved and what was deserved, between the stories told and the actual events, those gaps do not sustain themselves indefinitely. They close, and the closing is often uncomfortable for the person who benefited from the gap being open. What you're witnessing in them right now, the discomfort, the fear, the unwanted clarity, is that closing, the energetic accounting arriving at its balance. Not because the universe is punitive, because reality, in its deep and indifferent honesty, always arrives eventually at what's true. What's true is they hurt you more than they knew or more than they admitted knowing. And now that truth is landing in them as lived experience, as the specific, uncomfortable sensation of understanding what they did because the conditions finally exist for it to arrive. You created those conditions by moving, by healing, by refusing to keep the gap open through your own continued proximity to the story that served them and not you. Here's what I want you to know about what this season holds for you past this confrontation, past whatever conversation does or doesn't happen, past the moment of their awakening and your response to it. You are being freed at a level that goes beyond the interpersonal. Because here's what becomes available on the other side of someone finally fully understanding what they did. You stop being the only one who carries the weight of the truth. Right now, you have been the sole inhabitant of the real version of events. They've been living in a more comfortable, edited version. And carrying the full truth alone without the validation of the other person's acknowledgement is a particular and exhausting form of isolation. When they begin to see it clearly, something shifts in that dynamic. The weight distributes differently, not because their understanding changes what happened, because your knowing is no longer entirely private. No longer something that only exists in your body, in your memory, in your quiet reconstruction of events. There is now a witness, and being witnessed in your pain, even late, even imperfectly, even by someone who caused it, changes the texture of it in ways that matter. It becomes something that happened rather than something that is happening. It moves from present tense to past tense, and past tense, Virgo, is where healing lives. One last thing before I close this, and I want to say it without softening it. You do not owe them your forgiveness on their schedule. Forgiveness, when and if it comes, in whatever form it takes for you, will arrive because it serves your freedom, not because it relieves their guilt. It is not a gift you give them. It is something you do for yourself in your own time, at the pace of your own healing, and it does not require their involvement or even their awareness. What they're experiencing right now, the fear, the shame, the belated reckoning, is not a claim on your compassion. You can observe it with understanding and still decline to be the person who makes it easier for them to bear. You can recognize their humanity and simultaneously maintain every boundary your own well-being requires. Those things are not in conflict. Understand them completely. Forgive them eventually, for your own sake, and owe them nothing in the meantime. They're beginning to understand. You, Virgo, have long since moved past the need for their understanding, or nearly there, nearly past it, with the last little distance shortening every day. And that movement, that progress, that quietly extraordinary evidence of your own resilience, that is yours. They don't get credit for it. You carried this. You processed this. You rebuilt what needed rebuilding with your own hands and your own remarkable will, and your refusal, stubborn, dignified, completely Virgo to let someone else's failure define the permanent shape of your life. That is yours. All of it. Take it forward. If this reading reached something you've been holding quietly, a truth about your experience that hasn't been fully named yet, I'd love to meet it in the comments. You don't have to explain everything, even just, this one found me. That's enough. I'll know what you mean.